The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Welcome back to the Keefer and Kurre. Oh man, I cannot wait to get into this topic today. This is one of those things, you can call them rainy day topics. Some people call them the Mount Rushmore topics. They all kind of go into this little chest of, is Pete Rose supposed to be in the Hall of Fame topics? But this is really interesting now because last night, Geno Auriemma won his 12th national championship with UConn. He now has more championships than any other coach that I can find in any sport. John Wooden only had 10. And so the question the question I heard this morning was, is Geno Auriemma the greatest coach of all time? And I said, are you talking in women's? And this person said, well, let's just say of all time, period. And I was like, wow. So if you go Google best coaches of all time, there isn't an article on this. Probably that wasn't written at least 3 or 4 years ago. And a lot's happened over the last 3 or 4 years, including some guy named Nick Saban, who's done pretty well for himself at Alabama. But someone needs to come out with another great article, the best coaches of all time, because if you look back in 2016, 2017, it's a totally different story. Hey, before I get there, though, I know you're a huge hockey fan. Alexander Ovechkin last night, talk a little bit about what he did 5, 6, 7 years ago. This was a record that was never going to be broken. And of course, by the golden boy, number 99, Wayne Gretzky, a guy, again, that really didn't look like a hockey player, but was by far one of the greatest, if not the greatest, hockey players of our time. But Alexander Ovechkin, he is a hockey player's hockey player. He is the man. And he looks every bit of it, missing teeth and all. But talk a little bit about what he did yesterday.
You know, Tony, Ovechkin has been a complete, let's just call him a freak, since he was able to come over from Russia and play in the National Hockey League. This is his 20th season. He's played 20 years in a sport that the shelf life's got to be, basically, I don't know. I'd like to see the average. It can't be more than 8 or 9 years. So this guy's played twice as long. The physical demands of hockey obviously are considerable. But Ovechkin came as like 18 or 19-year-old teenager. He's in his late 30s now. He's played 20 seasons. In his rookie year, he scored 50 goals. That's like a benchmark that's really almost impossible for players to reach. He scored 50 one other time, but every season, all 20, this is his 20th year, every single season, he has scored more than 20 goals. This season, I think he's up to close to 40 already. Now he has scored at 39 years old in the last 5 consecutive games to blow back past Gretzky. You're right, 894 goals scored. Seemed like it was unassailable when Gretzky set that record. He broke Gordie Howe's record, which I think was in the 700s, and Gordie Howe played like 25 years for the Detroit Red Wings. So what Ovechkin's done is just absolutely remarkable. But it's so amazing to me because if you look at Ovechkin, he's big and he's durable. He's just a large human being that can move around effectively and has the coordination on skates. He looks like an offensive lineman. I mean, the guy's just massive, and what he's accomplished is just beyond the realm of incredible. To score his 895th goal last night, it's just an accomplishment that's just hard to describe. I find it though interesting that a country that we have all this geopolitical conflict with, we're funding a war against them right now for billions of dollars. I think it says a lot about our society and our culture that we still welcome the best players in the world, even if they come from a place. And Ovechkin is basically, I don't think he's a naturalized citizen, but he's a giant I don't think he really claims his country anymore. He's become a U.S. North American Canadian whatever affiliation he is in terms of the National Hockey. He's a citizen of the hockey world now, not
Hmm.
so much. But I just find it interesting that we are open-minded enough and welcoming of the greatest talents in the world, despite the fact that they come from places that you would not expect. Because I can promise you, the USSR has a very high level hockey league called the KHL. And I guarantee you, there's not too many Americans or Canadians, if any, in that league. They're not welcome there. So I think it says a lot about our country and our system that we want the greatest in the world to compete in our sports.
The average NHL career is 4.8 years.
Oh my gosh, I was double. I
Um,
was way off.
yeah, which by the way is only a year and a half longer than the average NFL career, which is only 3.3 years. And of course, it used to be a lot longer because you used to have to work. Now the money's so big, you can get that first or second contract. And obviously, in Major League Baseball, I haven't looked to see that. That'd be a really interesting another topic we can get into an average lengths of career because the money's so big now. Most NHL guys, Major League Baseball players, hell, you can call it quits at the age of 30 and you're good.
Well,
Uh,
not only in hockey do you have the uh the situation where you're getting crunched into the boards and you're getting upended and you're taking these hard falls on ice.
mhm.
Football is extremely physical, but at least you're landing on a soft surface for the most part. Now that we've gotten rid of these concrete astroturf fields, but in hockey, if you get hit, Tony, if somebody hits a slap shot and hits you in the ankle, the top part of your skate,
Ugh.
or if it gets up in the
Mm.
air and hits you like in the side of the neck, you talk about hurt. If you already held a hockey puck, it's harder than a freaking rock,
I
and it's
know,
got a lot
right?
more mass. I mean, these guys, what they do at the speed in football, at least you get to huddle up another play. When you're on the ice for a 2.5 or 3 minute shift, you are going, I'll just say it, balls to the wall the whole time at these breakneck speeds, and you can just get slammed into the boards or tripped up or hit by a puck. I mean, hockey is just ridiculous what these guys do athletically.
It's crazy. I think I may have shared this story. I was dating this girl when I
A
first
hockey
got
player?
when I first got to when I first got to town, and I went over one morning to surprise her with breakfast. And one of the Birmingham Bulls hockey players was leaving her
Oh
apartment at
no.
6:30 in the morning, and
He was getting
uh,
a morning skate?
yeah, it's a little de-icing there.
Yeah, I gotcha.
And I confronted her about that later this afternoon. I just turned around and went and I said, "Listen, I'm not even going to pretend to compare to a hockey player,
Wow.
whether it's the ECHL or anywhere else. I'm not going to. If that's the kind of dude you're into, then I've got all my teeth and I'm not even going to compete." What I wanted to get into today, and thank you so much for sharing that because I don't watch as much hockey as I always watch the playoffs, which is coming up, by the way.
Yes.
But we wanted to get into the best coaches of all time in all sports. We'll start with Geno, 1,250 wins. He's now won 12 natties, coach of the year 8 times. His tournament record in the NCAA is 143-24. I mean,
Pretty good.
he's lost just enough games that he can probably remember every loss he's
Oh,
ever
you
had.
know it.
He was 15-18 his first season. Of course, that was the last time that he had a losing season. Was his first year at UConn. He's got winning streaks of 70, 90, and 111 games in a row. I remember the 111 game jobber because he was breaking his own record. That was just a couple of years ago. We were talking about that. And he's 186-10 when he's ranked number one in college basketball, which is just unbelievable. And of course, I don't know what it feels like. I hear Tom Brady saying, the sixth is better than the fifth, and the third is better than the second. And I don't even know. I was watching him last night, winning his 12th. I know it's special, and I know every championship special. And the reason it's special is because it may be his 12th, but it's his players first, or in this case, maybe their
Yeah,
second or
sure.
third. And so he's living his life precariously, if you want to use that word, through his players. But where would you put him? Because there was a list of the top coaches in 2016. Now this is 9 years ago, and Gino was 26th on this list.
Hmm.
Pat Summitt was number 9 on that list. And of
Yeah.
course, Pat had the incredible career she did as well. It was all Pat Summitt till Geno came along. She had 8 championships, but she really brought women's basketball before, Caitlin Clark. She was the first one to really bring college. Where do you put Geno, though? And we can do this anyway. You can do your top 5. You can do it in order. You can do whatever, or you can we
Yeah.
can just talk about great coaches. But where do you put Geno all time in all of sports?
Well, I'm thrilled that you mentioned Pat Summitt because, I think Geno and Pat Summitt are have to be mentioned in the same sentence. The difficult thing about saying who the greatest coach is, are we talking about just sheer accomplishments? Or are we talking about longevity? Are we talking about innovation and changing the game in some way, or making a contribution to their players in terms of their development as human beings and people and successful entities? I mean, there's so many different
and that's why
aspects.
this is why this is such a great topic, because
Yeah,
I'm leaving that up to you.
yeah,
You pick out your coaches. You tell me why you believe that Eddie Robinson,
yeah.
who won how many championships? 9 championships at black colleges in his life, and sent over 200 players to the National Football League.
Coach for 57 years.
I mean,
I
can
mean,
you not make that argument?
longevity is a huge thing in the discussion, because you can say, okay, Geno has surpassed Pat Summitt. Well, Geno has coached a lot longer. We lost Pat Summitt to cancer, cutting not only her career short but her life short.
Mhm.
I'd be. I mean, Pat Summitt got sick and had to quit. Had to step down from coaching, and arguably, if Pat Summitt was still active, they would be neck and neck now.
Yep. Yes,
So I'm glad you put them in the same category. If you're talking about accomplishment, I mean, Geno's got to be right up there with anybody else. I mean, because you win 12 championships, and like you said, go 143-24 in the highest level of competition. It's really a remarkable feat. The one thing I will say to and not refute the fact that I think so highly of both of those coaches. They put a sport on the map, so that, for one thing,
Yeah.
that was a sport that was just kind of considered an afterthought. Now it's front and center, and there's a lot of factors, but I think arguably those are the 2 people that have been most responsible. But the other big advantage that both Pat Summitt and Geno had, once you establish that you are the benchmark program of a sport, that's where everybody wants to go. So if you're a magnet for the greatest players in the world to come there, the greatest female basketball players at one time wanted to go to Tennessee, now want to go to Connecticut and play in this just complete institution, more than just a college institution of a sport. To be a UConn player, a female UConn player, in the line of unbelievable players that they've had. I saw Sue Bird, Connecticut, and Maya Moore both were honored at this Final Four as new members of the College Basketball Hall of Fame. So you get on that list with all of these luminary people. I mean, Geno's job has been easy once he got the train rolling, because he's got all the best prospects coming to him. He doesn't have to fly all over the country and beg people to come to Connecticut. So I don't put that asterisk on there to demean anything he's accomplished, but you just have to look at the record, and it speaks for itself. And then, Tony, in every other level of sports, we measure greatness by the statistical accomplishments.
Yep.
So you can't take that away from coaches either.
Yeah, the one thing I think is amazing too about Geno, his first championship in 1995, and his last one now 2025. It doesn't 1995 does not seem that long ago. It's 30 years ago.
30 years ago.
He's won championships in 3 different decades, which is amazing. And at the age of 70, I think he's 72, 73 years old. It should tell you that he can change with the times, and
Yep.
that's what I think is so cool about what he's done and what he's achieved as a coach. Yeah, I mean, it'd be really easy just to jot down. That's why we're gonna keep going around on LeBron James and Michael Jordan, who's the best basketball player. I don't think it's even close at this point. LeBron James, I think, is the greatest basketball player I've ever seen. I think he's the greatest basketball player we'll ever see. And I certainly understand that if you're a Michael Jordan fan, you saw him. They're 2 totally different styles. LeBron James is a freight train. Michael Jordan had a little more finesse. It can make some unbelievable moves. And yes, he's got more championships than LeBron James, but LeBron James has been to a lot more championships than Michael Jordan's been to. A lot of people, hey, he's 6-0, in finals. Yeah, well, there were 4 times where he didn't even make the playoffs. So, I mean, it's amazing to me because, when you're just looking at sheer numbers, Phil Jackson's got to be in there somewhere.
Yeah.
11 championships. And it's really interesting because as I went through these, if we were going to do a Mount Rushmore of 4 coaches, John Wooden would have to be one of them. By the way, did you know that John Wooden holds the record for the most consecutive free throws made in the NBA?
I did not know that.
He, when he was with, I guess it was the ANBA, the earlier league before the NBA actually got together. He made 134 consecutive free throws.
Cow.
And Michael Williams, I think it was Michael Williams, ended up coming close at 94 in the NBA. But 134.
That's amazing.
Free throws in a row.
And if you're a coach and you demand perfection, you can pretty much say, "Well, I'm just asking you what I've asked of myself." That's pretty impressive.
No doubt. Don Shula. I'm gonna throw a couple of names out. You just chat about it. Don Shula. I mentioned Eddie Robinson. Coach K. Dean Smith. Hell, we even said Bill Belichick. He's got 6 Super Bowls.
But the controversy of Bill Belichick, was it Bill Belichick or was it Tom Brady that was responsible for those?
Well, was it Phil Jackson or was it Michael Jordan?
Well, that's right. Or Phil Jackson. Phil also. Phil Jackson was a weird guy. He's just a different kind of personality, kind of a space cadet. But the fact that he in Chicago had all that success, then he goes to LA, and people will say, "Well, he wasn't a great coach because he always had the best players, the dominant players. He had Shaq and Kobe in LA. So big deal. He won with Jordan. He won with Pippen, but." The fact that he could take his act on the road and go with a completely different bunch of individuals, just like you said before, in a decade later where things, societally and attitude-wise change, for him to be able to win in a dominant fashion with both those franchises, because he got 6 in Chicago and I guess 5 in LA, that's a pretty damn impressive accomplishment, even if he was a weird guy.
Impressive. Yeah, and really the only time he kind of fell off the face of the earth is when he got behind a desk. I guess when he went to the Knicks, right? When he started
trying to be GM, but that wasn't, obviously he knew how to push the buttons of the greatest players in the world. And there's been many cases where coaches have failed to do that. So it's really extraordinary what he accomplished.
What about Scotty Bowman, the NHL, 9 titles?
Scotty Bowman is an outstanding person on this list because not only did he win 9 Stanley Cups, he won them at 3 different franchises in 3 different eras. Just like you said before, Scotty Bowman was fortunate to be the coach of the dominant Montreal Canadian teams in the 60s, but then he went to Pittsburgh, and the Penguins had always just been a mediocre franchise. Within a couple of years. Now, once again, you can argue, well, he got Mario Lemieux and Pierre LaRouche and all these other superstar players.
But he was somewhere.
That's right. And he was involved in acquiring them. People wanted to play for Scotty Bowman, who was legendary. And then at the very end of his career, Tony, right before he retired, he goes to Detroit, which had been a proud Detroit refers to themselves as Hockey Town, USA, but the Red Wings had fallen on hard times. Scotty Bowman goes there and wins the Stanley Cup. Yep. So, he is clearly, and I'm glad we're breaking this down by a variety of sports because, it'd be easy just to run into, go to college football and rattle off Saban and Bryant and Eddie Robinson and others, and the NFL, Shula and Belichick and Lombardi. All these are amazing names, but I like to kind of spread this across the board like you're doing and talk about a variety of different sports because the accomplishment and the demands of each sport are different, big time different.
You just mentioned 3 that anyone listening to the show right now is going, I'm waiting. Vince Lombardi, of course, the man who said you strive for perfection so you can be excellent. And then, of course, Paul Bear Bryant. When I got here in 1988, It was Paul Bear Bryant, and there was never going to be
Yep.
another, period. Paul Bear Bryant was always going to be the greatest coach, not only in college football, but period, the greatest coach in all of sports. Of course, back then, you didn't have a scholarship limit.
Nope.
He could give out 125 scholarships if he wanted to. So it was a little different time. And then, of course, one Nick Saban, who obviously has won 6 titles with Alabama, 7 overall, and undeniably the greatest college football coach. Now, even Paul Bear Bryant disciples are now saying, yeah, it's Nick Saban's to wear.
Yeah, because I did a show back in on local WJOX here. I did a show on a Saturday morning that attracted more phone callers than I'd gotten just about any primetime show I ever did. And the topic that day, it was after Saban won, I think, his 3rd or 4th at Alabama in his first 5 or 6 years. And I had the audacity to suggest, has Nick Saban surpassed Bear Bryant? And at that time, Tony, the Bear Bryant contingent, which many of those unfortunately have all gone to the next level now, but the Bear Bryant contingent weighed in with, that is an absolute, that is blasphemy. This guy, it's great that he's got the tide back on top, but all he's doing is extending what Paul Bryant built here. But what I always tried to counter was, Saban had that first mediocre season when he came in from the Dolphins. I think they went 7-6. They won the Pool and Weed Eater Bowl or something to salvage a winning season.
Lost to La Monroe.
Yeah, and lost. Yeah, and we still joke about Louisiana Monroe. They came to Tuscaloosa on yellow school buses. But the bottom line was, by the time Saban won his 3rd or 4th title, it was certainly a subject to be discussed. But if you go back, Paul Bryant had a long career in college football, but you look at his stops at Kentucky and Texas A&M and Alabama, Tony, every 2 or 3, that might be not fair, every 3 or 4 seasons, let's say, Bear Bryant had like a 500 record. You don't see that in this day and age with the Sabans and those kind of guys. I mean, Bear Bryant would win a national championship. Next year they would go 5-5 or whatever. And there are 4 or 5 of those littered in that 25-year career that just tell you, well, Bryant, when he had the horses, was doing well. And you made a great point. There was no scholarship limit. You could sign 200 guys if you wanted. You could stockpile every player in America, and that was just how the system works. So it's different eras also. That's all part of this discussion. Different eras have different demands and different levels of actual achievement depending on the results, based on what's going on the outside, not the inside of the sport and the programs.
I think of Sparky Anderson.
Oh, the spark plug,
who just was unbelievable with the Big Red Machine. Then, of course, went to Detroit and had Lou Piniella. I'm trying to think of some baseball guys. Dusty Baker, and that makes me. And then when you throw out Phil Jackson, and a guy who obviously had talent, everywhere he went. And I think that's what was so exciting to say when Steve Spurrier ended up leaving Florida and then ended up going to take the South Carolina job, because we all wanted to know, is it the coach or is it the players? Can he go to South Carolina? And we saw that it obviously was the coach, because he went to South Carolina and had a lot of success there. He didn't win a national title like he did at Florida, but of course he could win 10 games there. What sport is the coach the most important to a team's success? In what sport? And I think of Major League Baseball, and I always say this because, Terry Francona, who everywhere he's gone has been successful, and that's why I know the Reds are going to be successful. The Reds are going to make the playoffs if Terry's there long enough, period. Even with their farm league, even with the fact they don't like to spend any type of money, they lost 4 games in a row and didn't score a damn run, which is driving me crazy. But I know Terry Francona, you bring a guy in like that, you're bringing him in to get to the playoffs. And that's all the Reds care about. They don't care about winning World Series. They just want to fill seats. That whole town's like that. The NFL, the Brown family's the same way. They don't care about championships. They want to sell seats. It's a business. They win a championship, great, but they want to sell seats. But I'm trying to think, in what sport is the coach the most important to his team? In other words, when they bring that coach in, man, it's going to make a huge difference.
I would have said at one time, I would say football, but I don't think it's the case anymore because now football has these gigantic staffs. You need to be a great head administrator more than a great head coach now in football because you've got so many specialist coaches who you hire and who you depend on. That could be a factor in the
Great
Nick
point.
Saban discussion.
Great
Nick
point.
Saban had like 30 consultants. A lot of those were former offensive coordinators and head coaches that were not allowed to have any hands-on with the players, but they're up there compiling data on every single thing that relates to the program. So it's just different as different eras go. I think the most direct influence on outcomes of games many times, Tony, is the baseball manager. And yes, that's even expanded now where you've got hitting coaches and specific pitching coaches and different things. But the manager has to make so many in-game decisions and has to that's why it's called manager in baseball, not a coach. You've got to manage your personnel based on in this day and age too, with the demands of the game. You cannot try to win all your games in the front end and use your bullpen up where by halfway through the season they're totally gassed. You've got to manage an entire 162 game season. I mean, that's just think about that challenge where every other seasons, basketball and hockey are both 80 games. That's absurd. But football, you really just need to put on the show for 16 or 17 weeks, where baseball, it's every single day. And you've got to manage all those personalities. You've got to make the right strategic decisions. You've got to pinch hit at the right time. You've got to pull pitchers when they need to come out. You got to put egos aside and manage your team. So in this day and age, right now, I would say baseball managers are the most critical to success.
It's really interesting too, and I agree with you. What's really interesting too is baseball is the only sport that's not timed.
That's right.
I mean, you
exactly
get the pitching clock, which whatever, it's 20 seconds. But I mean, in every other sport, you got to make a knee jerk, make the call right now. I don't have time. You can't sit back and take your time and figure out things. In baseball, it's kind of like I'll get to it when I get to it. I can make changes, and obviously those changes can deter or help you actually win a particular game. But it's the only sport where the coach doesn't have to make immediate jurisdiction over whatever he's trying to do in that particular game or situation at any time. So, and yet I would say that it's probably got the most. I mean, there's some coaches where, if that coach goes there, they're going to be successful. Yeah, I know that Lou Piniella was going to be successful. I knew Spark Gaines was successful. I know that I'm trying to think of some of the other coaches just off the top of my head. Dusty Baker was another guy. I knew when Dusty Baker went to Cincinnati Reds.
Won every place he went.
And the funny thing is you get fired, and then a year later you're with somebody else. Once you're in the carousel,
let's throw another name in there too. And too bad because he's not really considered as much as he should be because he only won one World Series. But Bobby Cox won 14 consecutive division titles. That's just unbelievable. That kind of consistency.
That is really. And I'm so glad you brought him because he's nowhere to be seen on any of these lists. To win 14 consecutive.
And if you listen to players who played for him, Tony, more than any other coach I've ever heard. You talk to the old Braves, the Chipper Jones, the Andrew Jones, all those guys who played in those years, even guys that they just rented for a while, like Gary Templeton, guys that were, problems other places. Universally, people say Bobby Cox was the greatest man I ever played for. Not only the greatest manager, but the greatest man, greatest human being, most caring about the people on his team. So that's a huge. At the end of the day, what is a bigger tribute than that?
I don't think anyone would ever want to change what happened in Atlanta during those 14 years, but you can certainly look back on it and go, wow, and we only won one World Series. Only one. I mean, I remember being the big red. The Atlanta Braves were horrible. They were a really, really bad baseball team for a long time.
They had a former Reds manager, Dave Bristol, in charge right when Ted Turner bought the team, and they had lost like 15 games in a row. And Ted Turner flew to Pittsburgh and told Dave Bristol, go home to North Carolina for the weekend and take a break. I'm going to take over. That night when the game came on the Superstation TBS, Ted Turner in uniform was shown there were rafters in the dugout. He was hanging up like a monkey from the rafters. And here's the new manager of the Atlanta Braves, Ted Turner. And the very next day, Bowie Kuhn, the commissioner, stepped in and said, Ted, put that uniform away. You are not going to be the manager. So they had to bring Dave Bristol back. But that's what a circus the Braves were. When they signed Andy Messersmith, remember the first big free agent player when the players got freedom of movement, he gave Messersmith jersey number 17, but didn't put his name on the top. He put Channel 17 for Channel instead of Messersmith. So every picture of Messersmith winding up, it said Channel 17 on the back of his uniform.
That's fantastic. While we're doing it too, I'm just thinking about these. Billy Martin.
Oh, and he doesn't get enough credit just because he was just such a,
what did he get hired and fired 4 different times?
At least by the Yankees alone.
By the Yankees, Joe Torre.
Oh, Joe Torre, amazing manager. Great personnel guy.
Yeah, it's just great. And I love the fact that this conversation is morphed into just talking about great coaches, period, because it's just a wonderful thing. And it's so interesting because I've always wondered, my daughter was even asking me, she saw somebody, I forget, it was a college football coach this past year who just got fired. And she's like, wasn't he with this team 2 years ago? And I was like, yeah. And so why did they hire him if he was losing? And I said, well, sometimes it's just, putting yourself in a new atmosphere. Sometimes you just got to put yourself. That's why you have a guy may be the manager of an IBM store over here, and he's not doing real well, and they move him across town or whatever. And it's just a different atmosphere. It's a different crew. They get tired of each other, and next thing you know, and I guess marriage. You could even make an argument that marriage works that way sometimes. Too.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Sometimes just a different. Unfortunately, sometimes a different person. It just makes things make more sense. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other coaches without doing a Mount Rushmore of it. But I would certainly, and it's funny because I really didn't look at Geno Auriemma. We had Geno on our show. He's friends with Aldo Greco. And so we had Geno on our show several times every year. And I would always, do the best I could to ask him questions that I knew that he had never received before, because it's really easy. Can you coach men's sports? Why haven't you coached men's sports? We could ask Pat Summitt the same question. Would you ever go on to coach in the NBA or in this particular case the WNBA? And sometimes it's okay. You don't have to prove that to anybody if you want to win. A lot of people would say, listen, after 6 or 7 championships, why wouldn't you want to go off and do something different? Why? When you're the best at what you do and you still enjoy what you're doing, win 12 or 13. And I don't see Geno going anywhere time soon. I mean, he still looks fantastic. He could probably still win another. Dude, 82-59, that damn game wasn't even close. That was a 7-point line against Dawn Staley. And I'm thinking, she's like it. She's like doing Aflac commercials now. He blew her out of the water.
And what's really remarkable for me about that accomplishment is the SEC had kind of taken over as the dominant force in women's college basketball. I think just like every sport with the SEC these days, I think they're at one time were like 11 SEC women's team ranked this year. Yep. LSU won it 2 years ago. South Carolina just strolled to winning it last year. But for him to come to revive a program that had been the ultimate giant and have this kind of run in the tournament, and all of their games in the tournament were this lopsided ridiculousness. And that's still one thing about women's basketball. We talked about that last week when you went to the regional here. Women's basketball, you don't see 40-point blowouts in championship games very often. So they've still got to kind of tighten that up. I don't know why that happens, but this just shows Connecticut just was on an absolute roll, because they were supposed to have, and I know that UCLA, I think they had lost their star player late in the year to an injury, but they beat them by like 50 points in the semifinals. So
I don't know if I don't know.
I can't remember a sport in the playoffs where you had 2 more gigantic wins against your 2 biggest competitors.
I've got you on my radio and TV partner here, Kip Keefer, and since I've got you on, I got to ask you. I love the fact that it's almost a pick'em game tonight. Houston, I guess, is catching.
What about
on.
Those coaches?
Houston underdog again. by a point later on tonight. That Clayton kid for Florida is lights out. Just an unbelievable, not a flashy kid, but the kid's just unbelievable. Put up 34 the other night. And then you got Kelvin Sampson. I mean, I had Duke winning it all. I was feeling pretty doggone cocky. I had them on the money line. They're up by 9. There's no reason you put them in that situation 20 times.
Game over.
19 times. Yeah. And I just, that was unbelievable. And kudos to the Houston squad. They will not give up. I have no reason why I cannot go against Houston tonight. I just can't. They have screwed me over so many times. And maybe it's because I don't like Coach Kelvin Sampson, but I'm going to have to take the Houston guys tonight.
Yeah.
Who you like?
It's hard. You know, you had a lot of good statistics on our K4 wins program on your network last week, and about Houston just barely sliding by in terms of just barely being over 500 in terms of covering the spreads. Mm-hmm. But all this team does is win. I think you saw what I recognized as just genius from our own Charles Barkley from Leeds.
That was a great quote. Yeah.
What he said on the postgame show was one of the best sports quotes I've ever heard. He goes, "What we just saw was skill versus will, and tonight will won." Duke was so much more skilled, so much more precision, so much more prepared. But when it got down to the end of the game, those Houston kids, and give Kelvin Sampson credit, or just the collective soul of that team, for them to that was the most impressive last couple of minutes of a game where you're down 7 or 8 points and you just completely suffocate a more talented opponent just out of sheer effort and determination. Will definitely won out over skill. And you know, so many times in human endeavors, how many times have you heard about the great armies of the world being thwarted by just several hundred just determined combatants? I mean, it's just such a great illustration of no matter how prohibitively better maybe you are, or how much more talent or how much more resource you have, sheer will win out a lot of the time, because that's what human beings are all about.
You know, the inbound pass too is almost like an onside kick. That should not be a difficult thing to do. And when I'm looking at that, I'm like, I'm sure shooting, you do an inbound pass with that type of pressure. And then people will say, well, why don't they do that the entire game? They'd be petered out. They'd never make it. They never make it the second half. But I mean, when game's on the line, I could tell you right there they were going to turn the ball over. I knew it. And all you got to do now when you can break that press, and you could tell it's practice where they catch the ball in the air and they're passing it up the court. It's a thing of beauty. It really is a beautiful thing. But I will say this, and I hope they change this. I am so sick and tired of the tie-up. I'm tired of, I mean, there are fouls going on. If you're holding a basketball and someone's grabbing a basketball, you're grabbing an arm, you're scratching a finger, you're doing something. Now all of a sudden you just get two hands in the basketball and they're calling a tie-up and it goes back. I hate that. I you know, particularly when there's players on the floor, I realize you don't want to get them fighting. But if you're on the floor with the basketball and you've got it tucked in your stomach and I jump on top of you, they're going to call a tie-up, regardless of whether I land on your head or get my hand on the ball at all. I hate when they do that. So,
well, you know what soapbox I'm on right now, and I think, and again, I want to take nothing away from what Houston did. It was absolutely extraordinary. But I think one of the agents that helped them do that was the constant stoppages of play in the last minute. It gives them like 4 more timeouts. Mm-hmm. When you're playing just relentless effort and you're spending every ounce of your ability on every play, if you get that 45 or minute break, that's huge. I mean, that's why you only get a certain amount of timeouts in a game. All this going to the scorer's table to adjust 0.4 seconds and all this nonsense.
Stop. Yeah.
They're
doing that without even anyone asking.
No, it's ridiculous.
They're just going to almost every play now, almost every single play now inside a minute. They're going over to adjust the timing.
The ball gets knocked out of bounds. Well, we got to go make sure we got the clock right.
And they're always going to add another half a second, whatever, because no one's perfect at the clock. And if you're going to do that, hell, basketball games will be 9 hours long. I'm totally
I think that helped. I think that helped Houston's.
And what's really unfortunate too, the only time you see that are in close games. And what do we want to see? We want to see close games. When it's 82-59, you're not going to be stopping the clock, but we don't want to see a 30-point blowout. So you could say that maybe it adds a little I don't know, feverish, whatever to it, but it just takes your air out every single time they stop.
I agree.
Maybe it's for the fans so we won't have heart attacks. We can just take a breather, grab a bathroom or a beer break or something. All right, my man. I know you're heading to Vegas. Be careful out there. I can't wait to do the show with you again on Saturday, ABC 3340 from 10:30, 11 o'clock. Please be safe. And I know you're going out there to see your grandson. Have yourself a wonderful time. You're a good.
My
grandpa.
grandson and my new granddaughter, who's scheduled to debut on Friday. Tony, it's our first female Keefer born since 1961 in our family.
Yeah, 2 for 1, brother. That's awesome.
I just can't wait for that, because like I said, these are the things that make life worth living. These are the grand events. This is going to be a really welcome addition to our family, and this kid is going to be not only spoiled, she's going to be royalty from the moment she debuts.
There's no doubt. You better have a pocket full of quarters.
You're not kidding.
All right, brother. Hey, take care of yourself, all right?
Thank you, Tony.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.